Thank you. Our topic today is your number one health priority. I want to quote from Entrepreneur Magazine. Had an article just a couple of months ago about the 3 fears of every CEO. Let's see if you agree with these. Let's start with number 3. They don't want to look foolish. Number 2, they will make the wrong decision. They're afraid they'll make the wrong decision. Then the number 1 fear that CEOs have is that their information is incomplete. What do you think? Is that a pretty good list? Yes, well, I'm here to tell you, everybody, that your information is incomplete when it comes to your health, and that's our topic today. We're going to discuss specifically the biggest threat to your health and longevity, a totally new way of prevention and treatment, and the fact that the time is now to do something about it, not when symptoms present themselves. I want to introduce you to Vin Prothro. He's CEO of Dallas Semiconductor. No heart history, no problems, and yet died during a board meeting, and he was just 58 years old. Jim Catalupo was CEO of McDonald's, had a heart attack at age 60. You think the French fries had anything to do with that? I'm just guessing, I don't know. Michael Brown, CEO of Datacom Corporation, heart attack, age 46. Luke Visconti, CEO of something called Diversity Inc. Cholesterol, good. Blood pressure, good. Non-smoker, stroke at age 54. Lost use of his left arm and left leg, and now he's in therapy. Jerry Junkin, CEO of Texas Instruments, heart attack, age 58. Ladies, you're not immune either. Brenda Barnes, CEO of Sara Lee, had a stroke at age 56. This was in the news just recently as well. John Menser, who was the CEO of Michael's Stores, had to resign because he wasn't able to continue in his capacity as CEO as a result of having a stroke at age 61. And Phil Baxter, CEO, heart attack, age 48. There's a pattern here. Since we're in Boston, I thought I would just Google and see if this was relevant to our local area. And sure enough, here in the Boston Globe, heart attack claims this CEO, Jerry Fishman, of a company called Analog Devices. I hope to make this very personal for all of you today. Your chances of dying from a heart attack or stroke are greater than any other single cause. The good news is it doesn't have to continue that way. The great news is I'm going to share with you some information that your physician and cardiologist don't tell you about because, frankly, they don't know about it. I'm not that smart, but I surround myself with a whole bunch of really smart people. I want to share some of that insight with you today. Ladies and gentlemen, your lifetime risk of having a heart attack or stroke, once you reach 40, and if you are a man, your odds are 2 out of 3 that that's what's going to get you, is cardiovascular disease. Ladies, 1 out of every 2 women will have cardiovascular disease in their death certificate as the cause of death. Once you reach 40, those are the statistics. If you have a heart attack, the average life lost is 17 years. That's a huge amount of time out of your life. Some of you may be familiar with the Vietnam War Memorial. It's the most popular tourist attraction in the nation's capital. More people go to see the Vietnam Memorial than anything else, and whether you know it or not, there's 58,000 names on that memorial. And 58,000 people lost their lives, boys and girls. Some of you are old enough to remember that war, how that tore this country apart, the riots in the streets. And folks, as much of a tragedy as that war was, as much as that tore this country apart, what I believe to be even more of a tragedy is this. Listen, that's the same number that die from cardiovascular disease in the United States. Heart attack, stroke, same disease, different location. That's the same number that die from cardiovascular disease in the United States every 3 weeks. Every 3 weeks, we have another Vietnam War in the United States. Every 21 days, we have another 58,000 gone. And you know what happens after that? It repeats itself. And you know what happens after that? It repeats itself again. And a bunch of those folks are running companies, just like you are. Every 25 seconds, someone in this country has a heart attack. Every minute, someone dies from one. We have 1 million heart attacks annually in the U.S. And every 40 seconds, someone has a stroke. Ladies, we're not going to leave you out. As a matter of fact, you've come quite a long way when it comes to equality in this area. Now, more women die from cardiovascular disease than men do. It gets men earlier in life, but more women total die from it. And you've been leading the pack now since 1984. In the United States, every year, 420,000 women die from cardiovascular disease, 270,000 from all forms of cancer combined. And there's a lot of women out there that are frightened about breast cancer when in fact it's cardiovascular disease that is their real challenge. 64% of women who have died suddenly from cardiovascular disease had no previous symptom. Gentlemen, it's only 50% for you. Let's not miss this. Do you realize what that says? That means the most common first symptom that you have cardiovascular disease, if you are a man or a woman, is that you die. And that doesn't leave you many options. And the problem with this is our current standard of care. Our current standard of care is based on something different from optimal care. It's based on a study called the Framingham study, and that is a big population study that we've watched over the years of what happens to people health-wise based on their lifestyles. And we can predict what's going to happen to you based on their experiences. But it's optimal care that you're interested in, and that's individual risk, not a population. You are not a population. I want to know about your risk, not you statistically speaking. Let's look at a 50-year-old male. Let's say you're a 50-year-old man here today. If you don't smoke, your cholesterol numbers are pretty good. You're not overweight, you eat well, you exercise. Your odds of having a heart attack over the next 10 years statistically are 4%. In other words, it's not going to happen. Your physician's going to say, hey, just keep it up. I'll see you in the future sometime. And yet, folks, everyone has heard of people that have died unexpectedly in their 40s or 50s, and I just gave you some examples of CEOs who were probably told everything was fine because statistically they weren't at risk, but individually they were walking blind. You never know is what people will say. Well, you just never know. Oh, too bad. Yeah, did you hear about them? Yeah, too bad. You just never know. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you today, we do know now. We can see a heart attack coming. We can see a stroke coming, but not by the current standard of care. There is a new protocol that I'm going to share with you today that makes all the difference. And by the way, this will be the standard of care 15 years from now, but some of you don't have 15 years to wait. They did a study of 222 people, listen, who had already had heart attacks and strokes. The men were less than 55 years old. The women were less than 65 years old. And the current standards of predicting whether somebody was at risk for heart disease or stroke missed 82% of the women and missed 66% of the males. These folks were told everything was fine, and yet they went on to have a heart attack or a stroke. We need to do better than that. Here is the very good news. If you will follow a specific protocol, we can now, for all practical purposes, pretty well assure you that you will never have a heart attack or stroke. That's a bold statement, and you're not going to hear many people say that. What you're going to learn is not taught at your doctor's office. It is not practiced by most cardiologists as well. Do you all realize it takes sometimes 15 years for research, good science research, to get down to the day-to-day practice level of your physician? Again, we don't have that much time for some people. I'm going to be bold here and say what I'm going to share with you today is the most important thing you will learn at this conference. In all due respect, you've got a lot of good people here. But what I'm going to share with you today can save your life, and that's hard to compete with. So, on the screen right now is a depiction of what your heart looks like. It's an amazing muscle, and that muscle needs nutrient, and it needs nutrition, and it needs vitamins and minerals and oxygen, and it needs to get rid of the normal metabolic products that happen just from metabolism. That's what the circulatory system is all about. If those arteries get clogged up and the blood can't flow anymore, that part of the heart dies. That's called a myocardial infarction, a heart attack. If the exact same thing happens in the brain, it's called a stroke. This is a good clean artery. I hope all of your arteries look like this. This is a side view of the blood would be coming out at you. This is what your arteries look like when you were born. And this is what advanced atherosclerosis looks like. And you can see there's not much room for that blood to flow anymore. And now what I'm about to tell you is a total paradigm shift of our understanding about the big killer of men and women in this country. Let's bring it up to date. What you're now seeing is a depiction of what your artery looks like. And here's the thing. We now know that the disease happens in the artery wall first. Only when it is very progressed does it get in the way of the blood flow. The hole is called the lumen. And when you get to the picture that you just saw a moment ago where there wasn't much room left anymore, that's quite advanced. and that can kill you. But most people, listen, that have heart attacks or strokes have clean arteries before they have a heart attack or stroke, and that's news to most everybody. Because we now understand that the disease is happening in the arterial wall, and if the plaque, the disease in the arterial wall, breaks and spills its contents into the hole, the lumen where the blood flows, the body will attempt to fix that, and then a clot forms. You had clean arteries 1 minute before you had the heart attack or the stroke. Look on this picture right here. In the upper left-hand corner, about 10 o'clock on that slide, you will see what is called plaque. And there's a close-up of it as well. Notice how clean the artery is, everybody. Notice that the blood is not being impeded in any way. If you go to a physician's office with arteries like that, you will pass a stress test. You will pass an EKG, and you could have a heart attack the next day if that plaque ruptures. Here's what you see right here, and this was fatal in this individual. You see the artery is pretty well open until the clot formed because of the break. How many of you remember Tim Russert, the NBC newsman? You remember him a couple years ago? Yes. Well, look on the slide, you'll see he was taking a statin, a cholesterol drug. He was on aspirin to thin his blood out. He was taking an ACE inhibitor, probably for blood pressure medicine. He had reached his target blood cholesterol numbers. He was a star pupil. He passed a stress test and died 8 weeks later. And people are confused, how could that possibly be? In all due respect, it's probably because his physician, his cardiologist, was looking at the hole where the blood flows, not the arterial wall where the disease starts first. For individuals, your true actual risk, that is what we need to find out. How severe is it, and where are you specifically in your status? That needs to be determined first. Here's the very good news. You can live a long, healthy life with plaque in your arteries as long as they don't misbehave. As long as they don't rupture and break, you can live with hardening of the arteries. I have it, and yet I'm not afraid of the disease anymore. I'm controlling it. But I had to find out I had it. Looking at me, you wouldn't think I have hardening of the arteries, atherosclerosis, but I'm pretty advanced. The good news is I can live a long, healthy life, and so can you, as long as you keep that plaque stable. We can determine if it's going to be stable or not stable by a number of new tests. Again, your physician is not doing, your cardiologist is not doing, but part of it is genetics. And let's talk just a moment about that. Here's a couple of things that are worthy of your notes. One genotype is called the 9p21 genotype. If you have this, you have twice the risk of an early heart attack, and you'd never know it unless you had the test done. You have a 74% increased risk, by the way, in having an abnormal abdominal aneurysm, which can be fatal as well. There's something called the KIF6 genotype. If you have the KIF6 genotype, this tells us a lot about how you respond to cholesterol medicines. We know that 40% of people with this particular genotype do not respond positively to things like Lipitor and Pravachol. Some of you may be on those statins right now. Now listen to this. Your numbers go down, it looks good, but you're not getting the protection that the numbers would imply. We will only know that if you get your KIF6 measured. And then there's the interleukin-1 genotype as well. There's lots of these. Here's just a couple of them. And this means you tend to have much higher rates of inflammation. Ladies and gentlemen, it's that inflammation that causes the plaque to spill its contents into the artery walls. And we got to cool that inflammation down, and there's all kinds of things you can do that will accomplish that. But the bad news is being an American pretty well guarantees inflammation because of diet and lifestyle and stress and everything else that goes along with it. So who is this for? Let's look at this. Who is this for? This is for those of you that are here today that have a history of heart disease in your family. You've got some blood cholesterol problems. You know all about this already. And it's for those of you here today as well who are in good shape. Because you see, that's the dangerous thing. You've been told that everything is pretty good. Tim Russert was told everything is pretty good as well. Your cholesterol numbers are fine. You might be on a statin as well. You exercise, you're not overweight, and you never did smoke. This is for you, too, to make sure that the standard of care doesn't drop you off like it did a lot of those other CEOs as well. By the way, I qualify for that group, and yet I have the disease. You can't tell on the outside what's happening on the inside. Now, let me give you just a bonus. This is something probably not expected. If you will participate in this protocol, you will be mentally sharper as the years go on. Not only do you prevent a heart attack or a stroke, you will be more efficient at what you do. Why is that? The very small arteries in the brain are susceptible to the same disease that the arteries of your heart are. And those very tiny microvessels that supply oxygen to your brain cells, if they become atherosclerotic, they affect your ability to think and function. And we call that old age dementia. It has very little to do with old age. It is the progression of the disease. Atherosclerosis of the kidney, well, those folks need dialysis. Atherosclerosis of the heart, heart attack. Atherosclerosis of the brain arteries, stroke, as we said. And here's something, please pay attention. Erectile dysfunction medications now are $1 billion a year business worldwide, $1 billion a year. Gentlemen, if you're having erectile problems and you're in your 40s or 50s, the very small vessels in the penis cannot function appropriately. That is your body telling you, most likely, you have a cardiovascular problem, and most of these men think they have a sexual problem. I want to introduce you to one more CEO. This was the CEO of my family when I was growing up. His name was Gilbert Mines, and he died of cardiovascular disease back on December 8th of 1978. He was 56 years old. It is one of the reasons I do what I do today. I've spent my career trying to help people avoid the tragedy that hit my family at a very young age. You know, my sister was just 16 when she became a child without a father, and I was just 23. It's tough to be a teenager. It's tougher when you lose a parent. My mom became a widow when she was 52. Would you agree that's too young to be a widow? All of these CEOs here that you see on the screen depended on the current medical standards for cardiovascular care. And as good as their doctors were, and as sincerely as they tried to help, the current standard of care failed to protect these CEOs. So let me ask you, how important are you to your company? What would happen if you were suddenly gone? More importantly, what would it mean to your family? I have cardiovascular disease, but I don't fear it anymore. It's genetic. It's not from lifestyle. Some of you have got a good lifestyle, but your genetic pool is not so good. But ladies and gentlemen, listen carefully. Genetics is your tendency. It is not your destiny. That's a powerful statement right there. I can tell you right now that most of you in this room have some degree of cardiovascular disease. I know that because you are Americans. What we don't know, however, is what is the cause and just how close are you to having an event. That can be determined. The good news is that your company never has to have a story like those CEOs had. And if you take some action now, you can prevent that from happening. If I could make time go backwards, I would make my dad attend this event in July. But back in the 70s, we knew nothing. Today, we have that knowledge. But listen, it is not common knowledge yet. I hope you will take advantage of that opportunity to do something about it. I hope your kids never have a story like myself and my sister and my mom have. You can help them. You can help your company. And you can help yourself.
The first thing I want to ask you about the program, which I think is really cool, and we wanted to include this because when you start seeing the pictures, the before and afters, you know, and when you start seeing the pictures of all these CEOs and CMOs and CFOs, it hits across the board, right? Let me ask you a question. Does insurance cover this?
It doesn't. This is on your own.
This is. But what an investment, though.
Well, and keep this in mind, too. Almost everybody has car insurance. And, of course, car insurance doesn't pay for changing your oil or rotating your tires. That's right. Maintenance. You do that so that the car lasts a long time. The car insurance is there in case of a catastrophe, and you need that. But health insurance is not interested in prevention. By the way, if you have a heart attack, your health insurance, you probably all have good health insurance, and it'll cover it if you make it to the hospital. A whole lot of people don't make the ride.
That's right.
And once you get there, they will spend $100,000 or $250,000 on keeping you alive. That's a great system. I'd rather pay a little bit, just invest a little bit and not make the trip.
So what made you want to start this? I mean, you came to me, I think we were in Miami.
Yeah.
And you said, Jeff, I'd really like to do this. I said, what? What is this? And we delved into it. And at first I said, I don't think we want to do that. And then the more I looked at it, I said, yeah, we do. What made you want to start this?
Well, it's personal for me. I mean, you know, I learned this lesson when I was a pretty young man. My dad died at 56. I thought he was an old guy when he died, and then I became 56, and I thought...
And that's a pretty young guy.
That's a pretty young guy.
That's exactly a young guy. So what can I do for me in my daily life to relieve the stress that's in my life? And I have a lot of it.
Yeah, I don't have a magic answer for that. I mean, you guys are all into the stress business, and stress makes the hormone called cortisol go up, and cortisol is one of the factors that initiates the lesion in the arterial wall that starts the process for the plaque to start. Many other things do that too.
So we're going to have it no matter what. So if we're going to have it, let's at least know the other things that we can do to prevent those other pieces as well.
Indeed, and you can control that inflammation. Here's the exciting news, Jeffrey. We never knew this before. You can reverse the disease. Yeah. We never knew you could do that. That's relatively new information in the last couple of years. The best thing we thought you could do was hold the disease so it would not progress anymore. Now we understand if you will aggressively go after this disease, you can back it up and buy more years. That's pretty exciting.
And it's going to help energize my life, right?
Your brain is going to work better if the blood flow to those brain cells is not impeded by hardening of the arteries.
And it's a lot better to do that from a healthy way than the way I was doing backstage with 4 double espressos.
Indeed.
Right?
Yes,
all right.
sir.
Everybody give David a round of applause. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you, David.
Thank you.